So, plan for today is to look at the syllabus, have a discussion about assessment and also goal setting, and show you where the first couple of worksheets will need to be submitted. I don't have the assessment there, but it will be there once I'm done with you. I will go home and get that assessment set up for you. So before we start on the workbook and things, any questions from yesterday? No? Okay. All right. So the workbook that we'll be using is this one. Hopefully you can see that. All right. It's quite old, this book, but I find it very useful. It's got a lot of good, hands-on, easy to use fitness assessments that align well with the content that we do in the class. So, so far I've not found one that's better than it, and it's not that expensive, so I always come back to it every time I'm looking at textbooks. So let's have a look at the syllabus here. No, let's not look at the syllabus. Let's look at the Blackboard page first of all. Let's put that on a new page. And let's go to the Blackboard page first of all. Okay. All right. My little picture's not coming up again. What's going on with that? Okay, so that's the workbook. Again, that's been up for a couple of weeks now, so I'm hoping everybody has a copy. Just a word of warning, if you buy a used one, you need to make sure that it's clean, right? Don't buy a used copy that has someone else's scribble all the way through it, so you can't fill in the workbooks. All right. Over on the left, same as for class, here's the email messages link. So when you are trying to get hold of me, if you're emailing me to do with class, please make sure that you click on the right Blackboard link. So if you're emailing me about class, email me through class. If you're emailing me about a lab question, please use this link. Right, so that they don't get muddled up. That would be good. The office hours link is here as well as a discussion board. If you've got technical questions you want to ask, and there's an office hours link here and in the classroom tab, so you can reach office hours in either place. And lab notes. So there are a couple of lectures that actually have PowerPoint notes, not all of them, just a few. And there are some other items in there just to help you out, all right? And some useful resources. So there's the energy systems review again. There's some information on nutrition. There's a walk test because our book only has a run walk test. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. So there's some other bits and pieces there for you just for interest, okay? You won't be able to see this third item here, so don't worry about that. If you were on campus, Dr. Barlow likes to borrow you to help him with his research, but you can't do that this semester, sadly. Okay? All right, so let me come back here and let's take a look at the syllabus. Okay, I don't know what has happened to the header on this document. I was playing with it before class started and I can't work out how to get the header up. Yeah, that makes it even worse. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but the header is exactly the same as the one on the class syllabus. So my office hours are on there. I think that's all you need on there. Remember that if my office hours don't work with your schedule, then just drop me an email and ask for an appointment. Give me some options of times that would work for you so that we're not emailing backwards and forwards 5 times before we make an appointment. All right? So this lab does not have a asynchronous section. All right? It's only synchronous. That means that everybody in the lab should be dialing in live to lab. Right? Everybody should be concurrently enrolled in HPE 313 unless you have permission from me to do otherwise. All right. There's the information about the workbook again, and I showed you the other readings. This is just weird. That's what I want. Okay. All right. The competencies. So this list are the competencies that we should be hitting within the lab setup. So they don't completely match the ones that are on the class syllabus. Remember that these are for if you're on the K-12 program and you're doing the teacher ed to be a PE teacher, or if you're thinking of doing alternative licensure to be a PE teacher. All right. Okay, so the first point here, student responsibilities, is different because this is a lab, right? So the whole point of a lab is to provide you with hands-on experience that supports the content that we are covering in the class, all right? So where the class does not have deductions for not attending, there are deductions for lab because the whole point of the lab is that you engage and do the activities, all right? So make sure that if there's a valid reason for not being engaged in the lab that you have let me know so that I'm not deducting you for an unexcused absence, right? You can read all of this. Remember, read this through carefully before you sign your participation agreement. Okay, so the assessment for this class is pretty simple. The large majority of it is for participation, so for engaging and doing the activities in the workbook, all right? And then there's a little bit of points just to get you to do the worksheet, submit the worksheet, keep it neat and tidy and not scribbly. I would recommend that when you are collecting data that you put it onto a notebook and then transfer it into the worksheet. Particularly some of the calculations are a little tricky It's better if you do it in a notebook and then transfer it rather than having to kind of cross it out and redo it because the answer came out wrong. Okay? You can see here the deduction. This is significantly less than the deduction would be if you were here in class. All right? The deduction's more severe when we're in person. But given that you might try to come to lab and your Wi-Fi just won't connect, in which case drop me a quick email as soon as you can, right? But remember what I said yesterday about, if you're having trouble with your Wi-Fi or with your laptop or whatever you're using, then let me know and I can let student services know and they have some resources to help you out, all right? Excuse me. Okay, I don't think that anyone will need accommodations per se. There aren't exams, there aren't tests. But if you feel you do, then please go and contact the accessibility resources people and they'll let me know. Okay? You can't cheat because there's nothing to cheat on, so that one's kind of self-explanatory. And then we'll look at our schedule. Okay, so here's our schedule. So each week you'll know what we're going to do in the lab class, all right? And what I would like you to do each week is make sure at the beginning of each lab, of each worksheet, they have a, let me show you. So they have a background blurb at the beginning of each worksheet, at each lab, all right? So it will be really helpful to you and to us if before lab starts you have read the background blurb, all right? Because it starts to make the link between the content in the class and the assessment that we're going to be collecting data on in the lab. All right? So that by the end of the semester you'll have a range of fitness assessments and you'll know exactly how they tie back to the theory that we covered in class. All right? What are we really testing? Okay? So just to point out week 3, so on the 4th of February, we'll be covering aerobic intensity measures. And that's because, if you remember yesterday, I said your physical activity portfolio is looking at aerobic physical activity rather than anaerobic physical activity. And one of the things you've got to be able to do is tell whether or not that activity was moderate or vigorous, okay? And that information in the textbook is way, way down in the semester, all right? And I don't have time in the class schedule to fit an additional lecture in to tell you about aerobic intensity, so we'll do it in lab. Okay? And then that will give you the information that you need to do your totals each week on your log of your physical activity for class. All right? Any questions so far? No? Okay. All right. So these labs then are fitness tests, fitness assessments. So the first conversation we need is, why do we do assessment? And chapter 16 in the new edition of the textbook for class does a very good job of talking about assessment and things like that, all right? But as I said, it's way, way down. So why are we going to spend the semester looking at all these different types of fitness tests, okay? So there's two reasons why we assess. And it doesn't matter what field you're in, right? The reasons for assessment are the same, okay? So first reason is obviously to see whether the person who's doing the work has gotten better at it, right? Or in our case, fitter, or stronger, or more flexible, right? The second reason we assess is to see whether the program we're giving the person does what it's supposed to do. Does it work, right? Because if they are doing the work and they don't get better, then that's not them, that's me now, right? That's my fault. That means the work I'm giving them isn't the right kind of work. Does that make sense? Right? So, what we should do, that we don't tend to do, or at least I certainly don't, I fall down on this quite badly. Maybe people in teacher ed do it because they're teacher ed people. But what we always should do is a pre-assessment, run the program, and then do a post-assessment, right? Because if we only do the post-assessment, we can't really be certain that that person got better because of my program, right? So I need the pre-assessment. Where are they at the beginning? Then I run the program. Then I run the post-assessment. Did they improve? Did the program work? Right? And what we tend not to do in a classroom scenario, at least a lot of us don't, is that pre-assessment in the classroom scenario. Right? What I ought to do is really ask you what you know about exercise physiology at the beginning of the semester. So give you our test day one, right? And then give you the same test at the end of the semester and see whether you got better, right? So I ought to do that. I don't do it because, to be quite honest, I'm scared of making you all so nervous because you can't answer any other questions on day one, right? And then you will freak out, and it's not happy making for anybody, right? So I'm a bit of a wuss when it comes to that. When we look at athletics, what often happens is the reverse of that, right? So you send your athletes off for their summer holiday, and when they come back from summer holiday, we have a week or whatever before we're allowed to start actually training, and we do evaluations, right? And then we start training. But then we quite often don't post-assess, right? We do the pre-assessment, we go, you know what guys, you didn't do that maintenance plan I gave you over the summer, did you? Look how slow you are. Right? And then we train them, but then we don't retest them. We just assume that our training is going to do what we want it to do and make them faster. But what if it doesn't? Right? It's not very scientific to stand there and go, well, I know it made them faster because I can see it. Well, that's all very well, but you need to test it. Right? You need to test it so that you know for sure. Okay, so that's why we do assessment. That's why we're spending, or that's one of the reasons why we're spending this semester working on these fitness labs. All right. The other reason is to give you an hands-on experience that supports the theory that we're doing in the class. All right. So we will tie these labs back so that you understand how they link to the classwork. All right? Any questions on that? Or on that?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Right? You can always, if something pops up in your head, write it down and ask me tomorrow or ask me next week. Right? So, you know, sometimes it takes a while for information to kind of filter through. Right? Okay, the other idea I wanted to talk to you about today again relates back to your physical activity portfolio, because if you look at the rubrics, you're required to set a goal for your physical activity, all right? And goal setting generally is a very good idea, right? I do it every week. I sit down and I go, oh, I'm going to do 5 days of yoga this week and I'm going to go walking every day. And then I get to the end of the week and I go, okay, I did 4 days of yoga and I only walked twice. That didn't, right? So I'm set myself little mini goals because I'm not very good at keeping them. Right? But we need goal setting, because goal setting is really one of the best ways to motivate ourselves to keep going. Right? And we can set long-term goals. So by next year, I want to have achieved X, Y, Z. Right? Or by the end of the semester, I want X, Y. Or by midterm, I want X. Right? Or in 2 weeks' time, I want this. Right? So we can split these goals up into manageable chunks. Because if the only goal I have is the one for next year, it doesn't feel real. Right? It's very easy to go, oh, I've got the whole year. Right? It doesn't matter if I don't do it today because I've got the whole year. So it's important to chunk it into smaller, achievable, more meaningful goals. Right? And then not beat yourself up about it if you don't make it. Right? That's important, and we're not good at that as athletes because we're competitive. And sometimes that competition is always with ourselves, not necessarily with the other person, right? And so when we fail to reach the goal that we set, we spend a lot of time telling ourselves off for that. Oh, I should have. Why didn't I? I needed to. I don't like myself because I didn't. Right? It's pointless. It's done. It's in the past. I can't change it. The only thing I can do is change my behavior for the next goal. Right? And I know that in here. I'm not very good at it in here and here. Right? But it's important to try to teach your clients. It's important to try to teach your athletes or your PE students. Right? Because this culture that we have of beating ourselves up is not healthy. We need to try to steer ourselves away from that. Okay, I didn't manage it last week. Let's give it another go. Right? So goals are important. How we set them is important. Right? So on the bottom of the rubric, it has the SMART principle. So SMART is an acronym that we can use for goal setting. Okay? The S stands for specific, and that is crucial when you are setting a goal for your physical activity portfolio or any goal, right? I can't say, oh, I'm going to do yoga this week. What does that mean? Right? I could do yoga for 2 minutes and I achieved that goal. Right? But that probably wasn't what I meant when I set the goal. Right? It's vague. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't hold me accountable. Right? So the goal has to be specific. To me, someone else can't set a goal for me. I have to set my goal. Right? So you might set a goal of, I want to improve my squat. Right? I want to be able to squat more weight at the end of the semester. Well, okay, but that's vague. What do you mean by more weight? Right? You might need to talk to LV and say, what would be a reasonable expectation if I train hard by the end of the semester rather. So I can say, by the end of the semester, I want to squat 20 more kilos. Right? So that's important. S is important. M stands for measurable. Okay? So that's why we need these assessments and things so that we can measure things. Right? So I have to be able to measure it to see whether or not I met the goal. Right? SM. A is achievable, depending which resource you're looking at, but usually it's achievable. So, I say, I want to lose 20 pounds by the end of the semester. Right? So, A, I may not have 20 pounds to lose. B, do I have the time to put in the amount of work it would take to lose 20 pounds? Right? So is the goal achievable given my resources and my time? And the reality of the picture? Right? SMA. R, is it relevant to you? What makes it relevant to you? Right? Not to coach, to you. Right? And T is it timely? So what's the, you can't say, oh, I'm going to lose 5 pounds. When? Now? Next year, in 10 years' time, right? What's the time span you're giving yourself to achieve the goal? SMART. Right? So I want you to think about those things when you set your goal for the portfolio. So for some of you, the goal may be, I'm an anaerobic athlete and I don't think I do anything aerobic. Can I even meet 150 minutes a week? Or it might be, I want to improve my time for a 10K. Right? Improve my time by how much though? Right? Improve my time is a little bit vague. It's got to be a little bit more specific. Right? So start thinking about what's the goal for the log. What am I trying, not just, I mean, you know, your academic goal for the log might be, I want to get a passing grade on the log, right? But what's your personal reason, other than the fact I'm telling you to do it, right? What meaningful expectation are you going to put on this activity for the semester? All right. Questions about goals? No? Okay. Part 3. All right, so this week you need to complete Lab 1 and Lab 2, but not all of Lab 1. So listen up while I go through here. All right, so when you look at Lab 1, all right, it's got several different screening tools for you to look at, right? So the screening has to come before the pre-assessment. You have to know that this person isn't going to drop dead with the pre-assessment, right? So it's very important to have the screening up front. Doesn't matter if it's a family member or a client, right? It's always important to make sure that you've got some paperwork that says this person is healthy enough to do what you're going to do with them. Okay? So that it's not all on your shoulders if something goes wrong. And sometimes it goes wrong. Right? That's the nature of exercise and activity. All right? So, you don't need to do the first one, which is informed consent for a bench press 1RM. Because many of you won't ever ask someone to do a bench press 1RM. Right? If you're an athletic coach, you might, but if you're a PE teacher, probably not. Okay? So don't worry about that one. You've got it there if you ever need it. Right? Don't get rid of your workbooks. I've got boxes and boxes of them in my office because people never come and pick them up when they're in person. Right? So keep this stuff. It's adding into your toolbox. The second one is the PAR-Q. I need you to do the PAR-Q. If we were in class, I would give you a paper PAR-Q to fill in that I would file. Since we're not in class, I need you to do the PAR-Q because I need that information because I'm going to ask you to go and move. Okay? The next one, so number 3, I would like you to do pre-exercise testing health status questionnaire. It's quite detailed. It's a good one for you to have in your back pocket if you want to be a personal trainer or something like that, and the gym that you're at doesn't have their own version of that, right? Just because you're going to train someone at someone's gym, don't trust the gym to know that that person is healthy enough for you to train them, right? So you're going to do number 3 and number 2 and ignore number 1 there. And then lab 2 is looking at heart rate and the reasons for using heart rate. Okay. We'll talk a lot about heart rate when we look at intensity. There are different ways of using heart rate measures to help us know if we're improving from a fitness point of view. I can use resting heart rate, I can use my submax activity heart rate, I can use recovery heart rate. So we'll talk about all those different versions. Depending on what you're measuring the heart rate for, changes whether you want to measure 10 seconds or 60 seconds, right? So I think for this lab, they do a resting heart rate that is, they get you to do it for 10 and then for 15 and then for 30. It's always best to take the full minute if you can because of heart rate variability, all right? Your heart rate, if you think of what our ECG looks like, that isn't the same every time your heart beats. And so your heart rate 1 minute might not be the same as your heart rate the next minute, even if you haven't moved. Okay? So a whole minute is generally better than chunking it up, unless there's a reason for chunking it up. All right? And we'll talk about that as we go through the semester. You do not have to do, at the end of every worksheet, there is an extension activity. All right? You're not required to do the extension activity because I'm just too kind. However, if I were the student and I had the time, I would do the extension activities, because the more you work with the numbers and the concepts, the more you'll understand how to use them. All right? But you're not required to fill in the extension activity and load it to Blackboard. Does that make sense? Okay, let me show you where you can put these. She says like she's even made up. Okay. Yeah, it's going to go here. So, you're going to click on participation. And as I said, there's not much there at the moment. But week 1 isn't there yet. I'll put week 1 up when I get home. So, there will be a week 1 and a week 2. All right, and I might put them into folders rather than just attachment, depending on what it is. All right. Sometimes I'm going to ask you to film yourself for a couple of minutes doing the activity and to load the film as well as the worksheet. All right. This week, because it's a pre-assessment, it's a checking thing, there's no filming. There's no point in you filming your hand, filling it, right? So there's no filming this week. There will just be assignment tabs there for you to put in the 2 worksheets. Okay? I don't know if there's an ebook for this workbook, I don't think so, but what you can do, there is a free app called CAM Scanner, C-A-M Scanner, all one word, and you can download that. When you've filled in your worksheet, you can take a photograph using CAM Scanner, and then it will turn it into a PDF, and you can load the PDF to the assignment in Blackboard. Okay? Questions? All right, so I think that's all I have for you today, unless you have any questions. I will see you tomorrow afternoon, and we'll start chapter 13. Okay? Have a good afternoon. If you're in Portalis, it's going to be in the 60s, so get out, have a little bit of running around, moving, walk